Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me once again as we look to the horizon. Apologies for missing last week's writing vlog. I had company in town on the day I normally record these, and I just wasn't able to find time to get around to it. But I do have good news. In the last week and a half since we've spoken, I've finished Burning Bright. We are on page 111. I've written the last line of the story in the first draft. I don't know if I'm entirely happy with it. I mean, it feels good to be done, certainly. But the last chapter and a half, I think I'm going to have to go over again very carefully and rewrite. I don't know if I got all of the emotional impact I was hoping to get, or even some of it. Admittedly, some of this is the problem of just being too close to the story, and I will probably need a lot of reader feedback before I can put a bow on this story, so to speak. But it does feel good to have it done, and it unfolded largely as I hoped it would. I have made notes of a few things I need to include on the rewrites, a couple of minor thematic things, and a major, not necessarily a major, a definite setup that I have to go back and add back into the narrative. Something I played around with as I was first drafting it that I discarded, and I later realized as I got to the end I would probably need to put back in to make everything work. Things weren't holding together as well as I'd hoped at the end. And I think that may be part, but not all of why I'm not 100% confident in the ending. Also, as I revise, I will be putting more time into long stretches of writing, which I don't tend to do a whole lot just because of how I try and squeeze the first draft into my schedule. So hopefully these longer looks at the story will let me work out some of these emotional threads that I felt didn't quite land at the end, or that just I hadn't built up enough. So, and with that, and with having, you know, the final written ending in hand, I think I will be able to go back and reinforce the moments that I felt weren't quite paying off the way I wanted later on. We'll see. We'll see. I've never gone back and redrafted something quite like this. A lot of my stories tend to resolve on resolutions of events, what you might call plot. And this one, I definitely want to have a much stronger emotional climax as opposed to just a resolution of events. You can see the series of events in Burning Bright coming very far away, and they should be, in fact, pretty easy to piece together. It's the emotional resonance I want everything to have that's really important. And it's not my greatest strength as an author, admittedly, but I'm certainly glad I stretched myself to try and do that here, and I definitely want to go back and really key in on that and make it as good as possible in my redrafting. So that has really consumed a lot of my attention as I've been writing in the last couple of weeks, and certainly I feel good about it, but between the other time obligations I had and the somewhat all-consuming nature of finishing Burning Bright, I haven't really done anything else. I haven't even worked on any of my collaborative projects, largely because I haven't gotten any new feedback on those. I hear I'm supposed to get some input this weekend, and I'm looking forward to that because I would like to get back in the saddle. I have done a smidgen of a looking at Everyone Wants to Laugh. In fact, I did some drawings. I tend to do character sketches as I am concepting a book because it helps me write better with a clearer focus. I don't have any of those on hand to show you. I did post them on Twitter, which is linked down below. If you're curious about that, you can go and dig those up. But they're also on Facebook if you follow me there. So those are worth looking at, but I haven't done a whole lot with that. I have done a little bit of thinking about Fire and Gold, which is going to be the next Roy Harper adventure. I have written down some things about the antagonists, who are going to be a very big part of that story. In fact, my plan is to get the story almost entirely through the eyes of its antagonists, which is really what I'm going for there. And I hope it will be very interesting and I don't know what the right word is. I know it's not going to be an entirely pleasant story because these are some pretty evil antagonists. It's not so much like, say, Fire Spinner, where there wasn't so much as a direct antagonist as they were dealing with forces of nature, and it's not really like Night Train to Hardwick, where the antagonist was a very small part of the story, in part to build suspense. And while he was kind of an evil man, or at least a deranged man, he was not as far gone as some of the characters we're going to be seeing the world through. And the point of that story is to create a sense of, I almost want to say it's to create a Columbo-like experience. And that may sound odd, especially if you're not familiar with the detective show Columbo. And so, a quick recap for those who aren't familiar. Columbo was a murder mystery, a murder suspense TV series about the titular Lieutenant Columbo, but every episode began with the murder, which, sounds natural. Of course, it's a murder mystery, but no. It began with you seeing how the murder played out, almost without exception. There were one or two episodes where you came in and you simply found a dead body. And sometimes that was used in very interesting ways, but the typical formula of a Columbo murder was that you would watch the perpetrator murder the victim. And this wasn't graphic or gruesome. The point was to show you everything they did as they attempted to cover their tracks. And then Columbo would walk on the scene, and he would be there for maybe 2 minutes, and he would know who had done it. But he couldn't prove it. And so he had to run down the perpetrator until he had enough little pieces of evidence, enough mistakes in testimony, enough slips of the tongue that he could nail his target. And it was fascinating to watch for a number of reasons. Partly because Columbo was a bit of a sham. He affected an attitude of laziness, of slovenliness, of sloppiness. He pretended to be kind of stupid and out of it. And none of that stuff was true. He was very sharp. He was very on task. He was very intelligent. And there was a fascinating moment that came in almost every episode of Columbo where this murder perpetrator realized they were dealing with a shark. And the whole time they thought they were swimming with minnows. And I want to get that kind of build-up, that sense of a villain who is really confident in themselves and is convinced they can deal with anything and has all the world at their fingertips, slowly coming to the revelation that everything they've built up is being torn down and stripped away, and they will inevitably face justice. It was always very satisfying to watch in an episode of Columbo as he played mind games with his target and got them to slip up and admit to things they didn't realize they were admitting to until eventually, bam, he had his perpetrator. And while Roy Harper is not quite that kind of hero, I think we can still tell a story something like that, which is what I'm going to attempt to do with Fire and Gold, but will necessitate spending a lot of time in the minds of people who are willing to do some pretty wicked things, like murder, for example. And I don't know if I'm entirely ready to write that yet, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm in the process of drafting it, putting together some thoughts on the mechanics of all of this, because the mechanics are what I value the most. Not that that's necessarily a good thing for all the stories I want to tell, but it is the thing that I have to sort out before I can address myself to anything else. So I need to get that straightened out, and then I will probably start writing that next. I am, of course, still working on Everyone Wants to Laugh, but that's very much a back burner project for right now. Anyway, that's where I am with the stuff I'm doing myself. There is one other thing I wanted to mention. There is a link down below, a brainstorming live stream to another comic project that I am working on with my buddy Narwhal, where we talk a little bit about his idea for Across the Farm, which is shaping up to be a pretty interesting writing experience. If you're interested in that, you can go ahead, click on that, and check it out. And if you have any comments on any of these ideas I put forward, by all means, share them down below. I always crave feedback from the audience. The audience is, of course, what makes any storytelling endeavor worthwhile. So let me know what you think below, and I will talk to you later.